Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're going exploring gold IRAs, how they could fit into a retirement portfolio, specifically thinking about someone with, a higher net worth who wants to diversify. You've mentioned wanting to make sure that your wealth is protected. And one source I was looking at even compared a gold IRA to like owning a luxury car collection,
Mhm.
saying that both are about holding on to something lasting. So let's kind of unpack that idea a bit.
Yeah, that is a pretty unique comparison.
Hmm.
But I think it kind of highlights something important, that appeal of tangible assets, especially when things feel a bit shaky economically. People kind of get drawn to that feeling of like
Yeah.
actually having something concrete.
Right. So it's more than just the shiny factor. But before we get into like the nuts and bolts of how gold IRAs work, could you maybe walk us through why diversification is so important for retirees, especially those with a net worth of, let's say, 500,000 or more?
hmm Well, at that level, you're not just thinking about having enough money. You're really thinking about protecting what you've already built,
Mm.
right? And relying just on stocks or bonds, that leaves you really vulnerable, especially if, we hit another big downturn. It's really all about spreading out your risks strategically. So, cash, real estate, bonds, stocks, and yeah, even those precious metals, they each kind of play a role.
Gotcha. And that's where gold comes in. So for someone who's like totally new to this, what exactly is a gold IRA?
Okay, so it's similar to a traditional IRA in a lot of ways, but the big difference is that instead of holding those paper assets, you're holding actual physical gold,
Hmm.
like coins or bars.
Yeah.
And you're doing that as a hedge against inflation and market ups and downs.
Okay, makes sense. But I'm guessing this isn't something you can just, set up through your regular bank, right? What are the actual steps involved?
Yeah, you're right. It's a bit more specialized. First thing you got to do is open an account with a custodian, and they have to specialize in gold IRAs. They basically handle all the specifics of this kind of investment. Then you can usually roll over funds from any existing retirement accounts you have, like a 401k or a traditional IRA. And the good news is you can usually do that without getting hit with any tax penalties.
Oh, that's good to hear. No one wants to lose a big chunk of their savings just for moving it around. So what happens once those funds are actually in the gold IRA?
Right, well, then you work with your custodian and you actually buy the gold. Now, this is important. It has to be IRS approved gold, specific kinds of coins or bars. That way everything is, by the book. And finally, that gold gets stored. It goes to a secure, specialized depository. It's not like you're taking it home and stuffing it under your mattress.
Right, right. So there's a whole system to make sure everything's legit. And speaking of legit, what about the tax benefits? Are those similar to a regular IRA?
Yep, you still get those same tax advantages. So either tax-deferred growth or tax-free withdrawals. It really depends on whether you go for a traditional or a Roth Gold IRA. But, let's get into like the why of it all. Why would someone choose this path? What are the actual advantages of a gold IRA? Especially for someone who's thinking about retirement.
Exactly. Beyond just, I don't know, that peace of mind of actually holding something tangible, what are the real benefits someone like our listener should consider?
Well, let's start with probably the biggest one. Protection against inflation. I mean, as prices go up and the dollar loses its buying power, gold has generally held its value. Sometimes it even goes up. It's a way to protect your savings from being eaten away by inflation. So in the long run, your money keeps its buying power.
So it's about maintaining your lifestyle in retirement, right? Even if everyday costs keep going up.
Exactly. Now imagine the stock market takes a dive. Well, gold usually does pretty well when other markets are struggling. It's like a counterbalance to those potential losses.
Yeah.
You get that stability in your portfolio when things get a little rough.
I see. That's a big one, especially for someone who spent their career building wealth. They don't want to see it all disappear overnight just because the market took a swing. But there's got to be some risk, right? What about the potential downsides of gold IRAs?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? Every investment has its pluses and minuses, right? What are some things that someone should really be aware of before they like jump headfirst into a gold IRA?
You're totally right. Nothing is completely risk-free. One thing to keep in mind is that while gold can be a great way to protect yourself from inflation and those, the market going up and down, it doesn't always have those same huge returns you might see, like in a really strong stock market.
So it's more about like preserving what you have,
Yeah,
not necessarily about super aggressive growth.
exactly. It's one piece of the puzzle, not the whole thing. Another thing to remember is that, well, the price of gold, it can fluctuate just like anything else that's traded.
Right. It's not like it's totally immune to everything happening in the markets.
Mhm.
Exactly. And while it tends to hold its value over a long time, there can be these short-term dips and spikes. And speaking of potential downsides, let's talk about a big one, scams. Unfortunately, the gold IRA market, well, it can attract some companies that aren't so reputable. They're looking to take advantage, especially of people with more assets.
Okay, this is where I start to get a little nervous. For someone who's worked really hard to build their wealth, the last thing they want is to get tricked by some scam. So what are some of the red flags to look out for?
Okay, first and foremost, be wary of anyone who's using really high-pressure sales tactics. Or if they cold call you with these promises of guaranteed returns. I mean, if it sounds way too good to be true, it probably is.
Right, trust your instincts. If someone's being pushy or making these crazy claims, that's your cue to just walk away.
Exactly. Another thing to watch out for is those really high fees. You want to compare fees for things like storage, insurance, management. Check across different providers. Don't get caught off guard by hidden costs.
So transparency is really important. You want someone who's upfront about all the costs involved. Are there any other warning signs to look out for?
Yeah, be cautious of providers who try to push you to invest in these really obscure gold products or things that aren't easy to sell, you know what I mean? It's best to stick to those IRS-approved coins and bars
Hmm.
and make sure they're from a source you know is reputable. You want to be sure you're investing in something that's recognized and that you can easily trade if you need to.
So sticking to the basics and doing your research, that sounds like good advice no matter what you're investing in. But there are so many gold IRA providers out there. How do you even start choosing the right one? I mean, it feels kind of overwhelming, to be honest.
Yeah, I get it. It definitely can be overwhelming, especially when you're dealing with something as important as your retirement. That's why it's so important to take your time, do your research. Start by looking for a custodian who really focuses on gold IRAs and who has a solid track record. Don't just go with the first one that pops up on Google.
Right. Experience really matters. It's like choosing any other professional, right? You want someone who knows what they're doing. So what else should we be looking for?
Accreditation and reviews are super helpful. The Better Business Bureau, that's a great place to start. Check out a company's reputation, see what other customers are saying. You can look for reviews online too, testimonials from other investors.
The power of the internet, right. It's amazing how much info is out there if you know where to look.
Absolutely. And don't forget about getting a really clear understanding of their fee structure and their storage options. Make sure you compare costs across different providers and make sure that storage facility is secure and IRS approved, of course. You want to be sure your investment is safe.
It's about that balance then, isn't it? Experience, reputation, security, and keeping costs reasonable. But all this talk about providers and custodians, it makes it sound kind of impersonal. Do you have any real-life examples of how gold IRAs have actually helped people? Help them reach their retirement goals?
Absolutely. Let's take John and Susan, for example, a couple in their early 60s. After that 2008 financial crisis, they realized that they needed to diversify. They were really heavily invested in stocks, and they felt super vulnerable when the market crashed.
Yeah, that was a wake-up call for a lot of people. It made you realize that even those so-called experts don't always have it all figured out.
Exactly. So John and Susan, they decided to add a gold IRA to their retirement plan. And it turned out to be a really smart move. The value of their gold holdings, it went up steadily over the next few years. And it gave them a much-needed sense of security, especially as they got closer to retirement.
So even when the rest of their portfolio was kind of all over the place, their gold IRA gave them that stability.
Exactly. It helped them get through that rough patch. And it gave them that peace of mind they were looking for. Another example is David, a retiree in his 70s. He was worried about inflation eating away at his savings. So he decided to move some of his traditional IRA into a gold IRA.
I can see why. Inflation is like a silent thief, right? It just slowly chips away at the value of your money over time.
Exactly. And by adding gold to his portfolio, David was able to protect himself from that inflation while still getting those tax benefits of an IRA.
It sounds like both John and Susan and David, they used gold IRAs to deal with their own specific concerns and to reach their financial goals, right? I mean, those real-life examples really make it hit home.
They do, and it shows how gold IRAs can be adjusted tailored to fit different needs and different risk levels.
Hmm.
But there's another side to this we should talk about. The world of precious metals, it's actually bigger than just gold.
Oh, interesting. You're talking about silver, platinum, palladium, that whole group.
Exactly. While gold is definitely the most popular choice for gold IRAs, it's not the only one.
So it's like having a diversified portfolio within a diversified
Oh,
portfolio.
yeah, that's a great way to put it. Each metal has its own unique qualities and its own, investment potential.
Okay, now I'm really curious. Let's break down these other precious metals a bit. What makes them stand out?
Okay, well, silver, for example, it's often called the poor man's gold because it's, more affordable than gold. But it still gives you a lot of the same benefits, like protection against inflation and a safe haven during those market storms.
So it's like an easier way to get started with precious metals.
Exactly. Plus, it's used in tons of industries,
Yeah.
which can affect its price, and its potential as an investment. It's not just some shiny thing sitting in a vault. It's actually being used in all sorts of ways.
That's really interesting. So it's kind of got this double role, safe haven asset and industrial powerhouse. What about platinum? I know it's used for jewelry, but why is it a good investment?
Platinum is even rarer than gold,
Yeah.
and it's really valuable because of its use in jewelry. And like silver, it's used in a bunch of industries too. It's that scarcity and high demand that make it, a valuable investment.
So kind of like gold, it has that built-in value that goes beyond just looking pretty. All right, last one. Let's talk about palladium. What's the story there?
Jadium is another one that's pretty rare. It's mostly used in those catalytic converters for cars. It has some unique properties and there isn't a lot of it. So it's an interesting investment for sure, but it can be more up and down than gold or silver.
Huh. It's interesting to think about how these metals, they seem kind of niche, but they're actually so important, like in our everyday lives.
I know, right? It shows you how connected everything is in the global economy. But let's bring this back to our listener for a second. We've talked about gold and all these other precious metals. How does someone actually decide which ones to put in their gold IRA? And like how much of each one?
Right. It's not just about throwing them all together in a pile, is it? There's got to be some kind of strategy involved.
Definitely. There's no one right answer that works for everyone. The ideal mix, it all depends on your own situation. How much risk you're comfortable with and your investment goals.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot to think about. For someone who's just, starting out with precious metals, it can feel like you're trying to figure out a maze. So, where do you even begin with creating that kind of personalized strategy?
That's a great point. It's definitely not something to just jump into without thinking. And this is where, working with a financial advisor can be really helpful, especially one who really understands retirement planning and, specifically precious metals.
Mhm.
They can help you figure out like how much risk you're comfortable with and really understand the ins and outs of each metal and then put together a plan that actually fits your goals.
So, it's about getting that expert guidance to make sure you're not just, I don't know, throwing darts at a dartboard, right way.
Yeah.
But even with professional help, what are some key questions our listeners should be asking themselves as they're kind of exploring this option?
Well, one of the first things to think about is your risk tolerance. Like, how okay are you with the market going up and down? Gold is usually seen as the most stable of the precious metals, while silver, platinum, palladium, they can be a bit more volatile, but, they also could have more potential for growth.
So, if you're someone who really values stability and peace of mind, putting a bigger chunk into gold might be the way to go. But if you're okay with a little more risk, and maybe you're looking for those higher returns, then spreading things out with other precious metals could make sense.
Exactly. And don't forget about your time horizon. Since we're talking about retirement, we're thinking long term. And precious metals, historically, they've held their value over those longer periods, which makes them a good fit for this kind of investing.
Right. It's not about getting rich quick. It's about building a solid foundation
Yeah.
so you can feel secure about the future.
Yeah, exactly. And while it's important to have that plan, it's just as important to remember that, well, no investment strategy is perfect. Things change, right? The world of precious metals, it's like any financial market. It's always evolving. So, stay informed. Go back and look at your plan from time to time with your advisor and be ready to make adjustments if you need to.
It's like having a roadmap, but being okay with taking a detour. If the scenery changes, you know?
Uh-huh. That's a great way to think about it. So as we wrap up our deep dive into gold IRAs and precious metals, maybe we can leave our listener with a final thought.
Yeah, what's the big takeaway you want everyone to remember?
I think it's this. Do your research. Talk to an expert. Get some advice. And remember, diversification is key. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, right? Whether that's stocks, bonds, or even precious metals. Having a well-rounded approach that includes, tangible assets like gold that can give you an extra layer of protection and some stability in your retirement portfolio.
That's a great point to end on. So a gold IRA, if you think it through carefully and plan it out, it could be that extra piece that gives you peace of mind, as you're trying to figure out all the ins and outs of retirement planning.
Absolutely. It's all about taking control of your financial future
Yeah.
and building a retirement that's comfortable and secure.
Well said. Thanks for joining us today on the deep dive. We hope you found this, exploration of gold IRAs insightful and helpful.
My pleasure. It was great to chat about this with you.
And to our listeners, remember, the best investment you can make is in yourself. Stay informed, stay curious, and keep exploring the world of finance. We'll see you next time on the deep dive.